Talofa lava and welcome back to Breaking Waves. Thank you for everyone who was tuning in today. We really appreciate your support. Today we have a very special episode, which will be addressing a lot of the interesting things that are happening in New Zealand media right now. And I have two very awesome guests and hosts who are increasing the diversity tick at Bluwave here. We now have two women in the office. I've been asking our team, we need more girls in our team. You know, I want more feminine energy around me. So I'm really happy to have Susana Suisuiki, who is here from R&Z, presenter and producer for Pacific Waves, also a cat lover and 685's heartiest supporter. And we have Rina, who is a loving mother, Māori and Pacific journalist, and Māori media advisor for the University of Auckland. Thank you guys both so much for coming into our show. First of all, how's your day been? I'll start off with you, Rina.
My day's been busy, in all honesty, but really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
That's okay. And how are you this morning? Susana, well, afternoon now, so...
Yeah, I'm great. I've just had a full-on week so far. I'm still trying to catch my breath with all the announcements that's been happening last week. But yeah, I can't wait to get into it with your show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. So we've seen it in the news, you know, News Hub, a lot of job losses happening, TVNZ as well with the recent announcement, and I'm sure there are more announcements to come, just not sure where, but it is a very hard time for those who are in communications and in media at the moment. So I wanted to touch base with you both lovely women in this space who is doing great work in the Pacific and the Māori space, to really give an opportunity for people to understand why media is important. You know, like when I think of myself growing up, I'm just like, yeah, the news is on, but I didn't really understand why it's important to have access, you know, a TV in your home that you can access for free to watch news. So I'll start off with you, Susana. Why is media so important in societies?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Media, or specifically journalism, as long as I've understood it, it functions as the fourth estate in our society, right? So that's holding to account our leaders, politicians, or those that are in positions of power. And that's asking them the tough or hard questions. And we're seeing that now with the debate around the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Journalism is also about shedding light on issues that tend to go overlooked, or they're not given airtime. And so it offers a platform for people who are seen as vulnerable. But the other side of journalism is that it celebrates people and their achievements. And it's so awesome, you know, when you read or listen or hear people that are sharing their journeys in their pursuit of something that's great. What I personally love about journalism, though, is that it leads to changes. And it's kind of sad to see that the impacts of journalism is underappreciated, especially now with this whole mistrust towards media. Like, people think, okay, because I come from R&Z and that's government funded, like, because we're government funded, there's that risk that we're like the puppets for government, which is not true at all. Like, we have that editorial independence. But overall, like, media journalism is important. And having come from the public relations background and transitioned into journalism, like, I didn't anticipate the pace of a newsroom. You're constantly working to a deadline. And that's something I didn't experience, obviously, in PR, because, you know, you have set hours. You don't work like shift hour. And yeah, the pace is much slower. It pays great. But if I was to, like, go back in time, like, at uni, I majored in public relations, but I tell people that I chickened out because I actually wanted to major in journalism. But if I had to go back in time, yeah, I'll definitely do more journalism papers. But yeah, journalism and media is so important, not only in New Zealand societies, but also, like, in more vulnerable, like, regions, such as the Pacific. And I'll touch on that, like, later on.
Absolutely. And I like the point that you brought up about like there's this misconception that people believe because you guys are fully funded by government, all you have to do is write pro-government
Yeah.
stories. So ha- in your experience, sorry, just one more question into that. How does your company or how does RNZ balance that?
Um,
Mm.
well, that's why we have like brilliant editors in place.
Yeah.
You know, they're able to like sub our stories and ensure that there's balance and there's fairness and it's accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like you can't just have like one particular voice for your story. You've got to like go out interview other people just so you've got like a full or whole picture of the story that you're putting up there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. What about yourself, Tinita? Why is media important?
Media is important in my perspective, and in particular for Māori and Pacific communities as well, is because you know, the media industry has a heinous record of not portraying us correctly.
Absolutely.
And often, you know, if we don't have Māori or Pacific journalists in the space, then we're having someone who doesn't carry the whakapapa incorrectly telling our stories. And it's really important that we're gauging it from a te ao Māori perspective, a moana perspective. And so it's really important that we have Māori and Pacific journalists in this space. That's what really stood out for me when I decided that I wanted to be a journalist. Yeah, it was just the fact that, you know, we're not really, the media is not doing what they're supposed to do. And I guess for me, it's also about honoring the treaty as well, because there are some things in the media for decades that weren't upheld, like in the treaty, for example, it talks about preserving our culture, or our taonga, I should say. And for us, for Māori, our taonga is te reo Māori, and that wasn't largely embraced. And I mean, even now, there could still be more work done around that. But it's just little things like that where I'm like, okay, well, if the media are going to honour the treaty, like they should, then we need more Māori in this space, and we definitely need more Pacific in this space as well. And I know that the audience for this podcast is largely Pacific, but I also just want to, you know, emphasize that what's going to impact Māori is also going to impact Pacific peoples as well. So yeah, I think by honoring the treaty in the media space is also understanding for Pacific peoples that it's actually going to benefit Pacific communities as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, we've picked up on how important it is to have Pacific and Māori voices in these spaces. Institutions that were, you know, originally structured for Palangi, and we're coming in kind of like, okay, our people kind of work different, we speak different. We're trying to bring our skill sets and our culture and language into these institutions so that we're being portrayed properly. And like you said, Serena, you know, they have a bad reputation of misrepresenting us, and there's a lot of mistrust. So now that we're seeing News Hub shut down, or some of their shows shut down, and people losing jobs, and also TVNZ, what does this mean for Pacific and Māori on, like, you know, because if mainstream is struggling, it's gonna be like maybe worse for us. I'll start off with you, Susana. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my heart goes out to everyone at News Hub and TVNZ, specifically the reporters for Virgo, Sunday, Midday, and Tonight bulletins. Yeah, it's devastating. You know, when journalists say that these announcements, these cuts, impacts our democracy, it really does. Like now we're left with a huge gap in our media landscape. And you know, just to answer your question, like what does it mean for Pacific and Māori? Well, I guess like for them, it's because we're wanting to have more Māori and Pacific journalists, and we've seen like in the past 2 years we had like a cadetship that was
Yes.
dedicated to getting more Pacific, more Māori in mainstream media. And so, you know, if I was to be in that cadetship and I was to see like the shutdown of News Hub and TVNZ letting go of like staff, that'll be disheartening.
Yeah.
Because you know, these cadets, like they go into these initiatives like hoping like to break into the industry, hoping to like put more of their own their community stories like in that space. But now where will they go? You know? I mean, we still have you know, like staff, we've got RNZ.
Yeah.
But like, with this gap in our media landscape, it doesn't offer much like variety,
Yeah.
in terms of platforms.
And it would probably dig into their confidence into finding a career,
Yeah,
because journalists, they have families to look after as well,
exactly.
and bills to pay, their houses and lights to keep on. So it must be a time of anxiety. I'm guessing. What would you think about that, Terina?
I think with the impending closure of News Hub, well, see, News Hub and TVNZ are the only television newsrooms that we have. So it definitely raises concern for Māori and Pacific journalists coming through. If one's being shut down and then TVNZ are axing up to 70 jobs, it's like, where's the space for Māori and Pacific voices going to go? And especially because News Hub, News Hub has, I guess, raised some of our Māori journalists. Some of them have first started there, and the same with TVNZ as well. So it kind of, it's rocking the boat a bit, and I am concerned about what's going to happen to our voices. But then it's also like, for our people, one thing that we are really good at is adapting to change.
Yes.
And we are, I hate this word, we are really resilient. But I'm just like,
Only because we gotta be.
yeah, gotta be. I'm just like, can we just stop being resilient for once? But if there's anything that we're good at, it's definitely that, and adapting to change. So I guess for me, it's like, okay, this does change the landscape a bit, but what are we going to do moving forward? Like, we can't allow this to be a barrier. We can't let this stop Māori and Pacific journalists from coming through. And I also feel for Renews as well, who
Yes.
I think they had 10 staff, and they were just doing so amazing, and they've got such a large following, and they reflect the voices of our rangatahi.
Very great stories as well.
very
Yeah.
great. But now their staff have been cut down almost by
Alofa.
50%. And that was quite a hopeful sort of platform for our rangatahi, and a lot of the up and coming journalists are rangatahi. So yeah, it does raise concern, but I think the future is looking more to be digital. So it's how
Absolutely.
can we move into that space, and just to, I guess, for up and coming journalists who might feel a bit disheartened and let down, just take that into consideration, that it's not over. We just have to find another way to move. And again, it's adapting to change, which we are the best at.
Absolutely.
I'll just add into that. Politicians, they said that, oh, well, this was a long time coming, the whole digitization of media. If that was the case, then why didn't they, take into consideration, like, innovating, like, the media, so that the proposed closure of News Hub and TVNZ, like, at least, like, they have some sort of, like, backup plan, or just it kind of annoys me that this was a long time coming, digital, blah blah blah, blah.
Everyone saw it. Even when TVNZ was going to merge with RN, there was discussions around that. I remember articles releasing about that too. And I was just gonna ask you guys this, because now we're under a national act, New Zealand First, the New Zealand First government, which is what it is. And a question I've been asking myself is, what's the government's role in these kind of situations where voices are so important? Are they going to do something about it? Their broadcasting minister, Melissa Lee, had an interview with TV1, and there weren't really many plans released about, anything being done about the current closures with TVNZ and News Hub. But like you said, this is something people knew about, like, even before National came into power, and there were like discussions about it. But personally, this is just my personal opinion, I don't think it was handled with enough care or urgency. And even now, to the point now people are losing work, it's still not being held with urgency. The broadcasting minister from National has not released any plans or any, I guess, vision for media in the future and for the next 3 years. So I wanted to ask you both, what are your personal opinions on how government should come in, or should they even interfere? Is this a place for government to interfere, or how could they better support the communications media industry right now? I'll start off with you, Tirina, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a really good question. I think just off the back of what you said at the very start, it's, media is a good way of holding our politicians to account. And yeah, that's extremely important. And I think for no matter where you are in the country, the most accessible way that we have to our politicians is through media. And so whether they want to make an impact or not, whether they want to say something, like, media is the way to connect with people, especially in this day and age. So the fact that Melissa Lee doesn't have a plan right now, kind of, it just shows that there's no care for the media industry whatsoever. And we have reporters like News Hub, for example, who are always, I think, for the people, like always showing up for the people, and again holding politicians to account. And so without that, what does that mean for our democracy? What does that mean for informing our decisions as well if we don't have the information? And I guess from an audience perspective, not everybody watches TVNZ, not everybody watches News Hub. They have a preference. That's just how it is. So like, it's limiting our resources, and it's not giving us, as an audience, not giving us fair access, in my opinion. So politicians need to step up, not just in that area, but in heaps of areas.
What about you, Susana? What are your thoughts?
We've still yet to see what concrete plan that this government has like, for media, and obviously I'm not in a position to tell them what to do.
You listen here.
Just, based on my impression, like just watching and seeing the reactions from our journalists towards the politicians, like I sense that they don't have much confidence, like, in this government, because there's no what's it called, like, reassurance, like, from not only Melissa Lee, but from Christopher Luxon, David Seymour. He's just on brand. Surprised me the most was Winston Peters. Like, when the news came out that News Hub was gonna close down, he said it was a disaster.
That's right. Yeah, he did say that. I think he was the only one. Yeah. The only politician that had something to say about that.
And I saw how he took the Pacific, like, he remembered his Pacific delegation he had previously. Yeah. He actually took care of, like, PMN, Tangata Pacifica, all the people that went through. He was looking, I was like, out of all the people who were going to criticize the media, I thought Winston was going to just go and, like, go through it. But he was actually being supportive with a few of the stuff that I've seen. Yeah, sorry. Just to add to that, Winston Peters, like, he's loved in the Pacific region, right? And it's a stark contrast,
to here.
Like Waitangi, where people are telling him to sit down.
And what's worse is he's from there. He's from Nafu, he's from Te Tai Tokerau, and so for our own people to, like, tell him to sit down. But then he's so loved in the Pacific. Like,
he's got a Matai title, bro. Like, yeah.
That's all I have got to say.
Oh, no, that's all good. I thought is good for us to kind of dive into how, how politicians should be engaging with the media industry. And alongside all of this happening, there's just been some terrible commentary online, and I'm not the one to like go and showcase this terrible commentary, but it exists. Like, these thoughts about media and mistrust with media exist. Like, for example, finally they're not being paid by the government to write pandering stories about Jacinda, or we're hearing finally woke media is over. So those are the kind of comments that really questions the work ethics of journalists or people in communication. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, like those kind of mindsets around mistrusting the media because you guys are being paid, or we're being paid to deliver a certain narrative. I'll start off with you, Susana, if that's all right.
I mean, these trolls now.
Now we're gonna get real now.
Just seeing those comments, honestly, it's hurtful. Like, we're human.
Yeah.
They don't see like what actually goes behind the scenes or what it takes like
That's
to
hard
get
work.
the stories online or published.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hurtful, it's unnecessary. You know, at the end of the day, we're real people.
Yeah.
We're just doing our job. Like, I think, yeah, it comes back to like the importance of media. Like, we're just trying to hold these people to account.
Yeah.
We're just trying to put into place like these tangible, meaningful changes. But obviously, they look at us and
Yeah.
we're like the puppets or the
Yeah.
mouthpieces for certain people, which is so not the case.
And I think it's like a confirmation bias thing, like because something shows up on their newsfeed, in their mind they're like, oh look, they're only publishing this, but they haven't looked to other sources. Like, what are some kind of this is a question to you both, so like thinking patterns around media that would get someone to have that conclusion that media is biased? Do you reckon it's just that confident? And you know, algorithms as well, they're gonna feed you whatever you click on the most, or whatever type of news that you like. So if you're on this side of the spectrum, they're going to show you this stuff, and then if you're on this side of the spectrum, they're going to show you all of this other stuff. So I guess my question is, how would you encourage someone who doesn't understand those things, who doesn't understand those things about algorithm and confirmation bias? How would you encourage someone to have a more fair approach to that? I'll start off with you, Terina, if that's okay.
There's so many layers to that. There are different influences. Like sometimes, you know, especially with the rise of social media and the involvement of technology, we're not just looking in our own backyard. We're looking at international news and how, you know, in the States, for example, a lot of their media is rigged, or they will just intentionally show like one side of the narrative and not both sides. That's American media, but a lot of people, that influences a lot of people's opinions here as to how our media is. But I think also, like, speaking for Māori people and for Pacific people, there is a lot of mistrust in the media, not only because of the association with the government, but like when we think about past events, like, I guess, so like TVNZ, they opened up in the 1960s, and prior to that, that was the radio. And because there was no reflection of Māori people in the media, and there was, you know, we were pretty much facing our culture being taken off our hands. And, we weren't seeing our representation. Our children weren't hearing te reo being spoken. So what they were hearing was te reo Pākehā. And I guess that has such a generational ripple effect that now it's just like, how can we trust the media when they betrayed us so bad? And it wasn't like over a period of like 1 or 2 years. It was, I was about to swear.
So I was about to get the anger out.
It's gone right back, like right back to the early 1900s. Yeah, and also with like Pacific media, when we think the Dawn Raids is such a classic example, like what was happening around that time and how Pacific people were being portrayed in the media was just like, we had the Dawn Raids apology like 2 or 3
years ago. Yeah.
And even then, like, because I was at that event and like seeing all the elderly there, like a lot of them were in tears because it was like, it brought back some memories for them. And I'm just like, wow, like it would be great if people took that into consideration. Like there are personal things that we're taking into account for Māori and Pacific people, and the government especially has a big part to play in that. You know, trying to eradicate our culture, trying to stamp te reo out, trying to replace all of our languages, not just Māori but Pacific languages too, with just English, and trying to get us to, I guess, become a bit more assimilated into society. So of course there's going to be mistrust, but how we get people to approach that, I guess it honestly does consist of a lot of empathy,
Yeah.
because these are very valid conversations. These are, and it's very validating for our people to feel that way. But it's just taking the time with them, and then also, you know, for brown journalists as well, where the difference between brown journalists and people who I don't mean to make it a race thing, but like for people who aren't brown, is that Māori and Pacific journalists in the media industry, it's not about like career ambitions, it's not about being the best reporter, it's not about breaking stories or, you know, telling the news first. It's because we're carrying the community with us on our backs. That's what's so important to us, and that's why we're in this space. And so yeah, for us to be here, Susana and the Pacific team at RNZ, but also Indira Stewart, she's amazing. She recently wrote, you know, the Israel versus Gaza topic is super controversial, especially within like Pacific regions, because, you know, we have pro-Israel and then supporters of Palestine.
Yes.
But Indira just has this amazing ability of cultivating like a safe space where no one's judged. And she recently published an article about, you know, both sides, Israel and Palestine. And, you know, that's why our journalists are just so important, because otherwise it's just people are going to see like from like an outside perspective, and it's not going to be portrayed properly. So there's layers to this. There's, in my opinion, not one straight answer to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm so sure you've seen that a lot in your work. How to unpack a lot of, like, when you're talking about Israel's you know, interception into the Pacific Islands, how have you managed to unpack some of these heavy topics on Pacific Waves? Like, it's hard because you have to consider culture, history, how, you know, Pacific people perceive Pacific politics, while not trying to be disrespectful. But there's so much that happens in the Pacific that not many people are aware of. But in saying that, how have you managed to do that in your work?
I mean, yeah, the whole Israel-Gaza situation is such a contentious issue in the Pacific. But people don't realize that it's not only Israel that's like vying for influence in the Pacific. We've got the big superpowers such as the US and China. So there's like this geopolitics competition that's happening in the regional space. How do I navigate, you know, unpacking those issues? Gosh, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it's a I mean, like I'm blessed to have like a group of solid reporters.
Yes.
Like who are able to motivate me to like not to ensure that I don't put like my own personal biases like in these stories. Yeah, and just having like conversations with my editor, because, you know, as journalists, like we're not like robots. Like we don't have like opinions. It's not like we don't come into the newsroom with like no opinions. And,
Yeah, exactly.
feelings
Right.
about
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it's so important that like we leave our own personal views out of the story.
Yeah.
But at least we have like our editors or our managers that are there, so that you can kind of like offload. Or
Right.
just, like, you
So
just
good
ensure-
support, good
just
support.
Good support.
I used to struggle with that, like when I was at the Herald. Like I would, you know, I'm there to do like Māori stories or even reporting on the dawn raids, and I honestly, just being straight up, would just come up with like one-sided narrative. Like you have to provide a balanced story, and it's so yeah, I agree with you. It's so hard. Like we all have opinions, but then it's, you know, it's about doing a greater service for the people, not just like what we think.
But you can't help it. Like we come from a community that's been historically mistreated and oppressed, and like, you know, it's so hard to be like in an industry to like be neutral.
And it's so hard to even understand what neutrality means, because even a collection of the facts can show someone's bias. So like when I constantly see comments like, we need a non-biased media, we need a neutral, it's like you can tell someone's political stance or their stance on a story based on what facts they've collected. So what does that even mean? Like that's something I've struggled with personally. And then this is where journalists' personal biases can come in, and they're just like, just report the facts. So what does that mean like for you guys as journalists, when someone says, or when when you have to just report the facts, but then as a viewer, you can understand someone's political stance because of the facts that they've collected or they've chosen to report on. If that makes sense. Am I making sense?
I think so.
Yeah. Like for example, someone writes an article about the national government and why one certain policy is ineffective in a certain industry, but they've chosen specific facts to support their case.
Yeah.
And they've missed out on a whole block of other facts. So some people would say, oh yeah, they're just reporting the facts, neutrality. But I was like, yeah, but there's parts of the story that they haven't covered.
Yeah.
Do you guys see it as another reporter has to cover that side? Or do you guys see it as like unfair reporting? They haven't really covered the story well.
I think one of the things, well, I've kind of been out of the newsroom for a couple of years now, but like one of the things that I remember in the newsroom is that we would, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but we would report things that people are talking about. So, and that's actually not good. but
We won't get in trouble for it.
yeah. That's actually not good. But like, say for example, like the government might come out with a statement, but we might pull out the things that are going to appeal to the audiences the most and might skip out other things. So, yeah, that can influence how people think. It's more like what's trending, what's topical. Let's move towards that. Let's speak more on that, and see what quotes we can get from XYZ, and see what we can pull together just based on that. And I don't think reporters are trying to miss anything out, but it's more like grabbing the stuff that people need to
There's
hear.
already interest in it.
There's an interest in that. That's my opinion. I don't know if it's the same with you guys.
I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a articulate response for that.
Don't worry, you can just totally be yourself. Like I've just always found that concept interesting. Is like reporting the facts and neutrality. What does that actually mean?
Do you want to give like a specific example of when you've seen that?
COVID, yes. COVID's a good example. You had
there are heaps of people who are like, why should I get this vaccine even though the government said it, and then they'll come up with some other sources, well, conspiracy theories, to say, you know, this is true. But it's just like, okay, but where did you get that information? And then sometimes they'll come back and say, well, why don't you get that information? Why are you only reporting like whatever the government's telling you? And I guess that is kind of fair. Tough times,
guys.
PTSD from that. From that.
Well, I mean, like COVID was also like a hotbed of like misinformation.
Yes,
there
was.
People trying to stick spoons on the side effects of. But like, I mean, you gotta have like some sort of special thinking, like to believe that. But just reporting on facts, just ensuring that there's like a balance. Keep going to the same experts, commentators. You gotta have like other voices in there too, like, especially from the community who are affected by those issues.
Nah, sorry guys, that was a really like deep question, and I don't expect you guys to have the answers because we're still, I think in New Zealand we're still are getting used to going onto that digital online space where, you know, people who can just wake up and start a YouTube channel and say they're a doctor can get information out there. So it's a transition we're currently in. So I didn't expect you guys like to like give me like, this is what's happening, this is the answer. But I did want to see if it was like a concern in the industries, which it is, that you guys are working with, which is cool. That's just what I wanted to bring up with you guys. But I have, we're just coming up to the end of our podcast, guys. And I just wanted to ask you guys one last question for our viewers who may be wanting to come into the communications or media industry. What would be your guys' advice to people who are wanting to enter it, even in this very anxious time for the media? I'll start off with you, Rina.
Oh, damn, advice.
Yeah. Someone who wants to get into telling our Pacific and Māori stories.
Okay, I think from my personal perspective, like believe that you're going to get into it regardless of what the landscape looks like right now. And just really focus on that. And I think one of the things that Māori and Pacific people bring to the table is our ability to network. And what I found throughout like all of my journalist years so far is that I was able to use like whakawhanaungatanga talanoa. It's so revolutionary to anyone who's not like Māori or Pacific, but you know, just remember that like, yeah, it's so important to make networks and to collaborate with people. It's not about a job, regardless of what, you know, the other people tell you. It's not about having a career. It's you're making relationships that are not transactional, like you're representing the people. So my advice, I totally believe that more and more Māori and Pacific journalists are going to come through. Don't fret about that. Even with the changing landscape, you're going to make it. Like that's totally my belief. But you have unique skills that others don't. Just that, you know, we're really good at connecting. Use that to your advantage, and you know, create solid networks. That's my advice.
Thank you so much. What about you, Susana?
Yeah, definitely support what Rina says. Seek out the ideal people, like in the media industry of you know, Pacific and Māori. Like in my experience, when I made that transition from PCF to RNZ Pacific, like I sent an email to Moira, who's the RNZ Pacific manager, and I just asked her, oh, you know, I would really love to get into journalism. Do you have any openings, or would you be open to having a meeting and just talk about like what opportunities there are? And she was like, yeah. Most of the times our own people, they're open to those sort of catch-ups or meetings.
Yeah.
So I say just go for it. You know, don't worry about what's happening, you know, externally, but just go for it, and don't let like your own doubts like get in the way of you know, chasing your dreams or aspirations in the comms and media world.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. So remember, utilize your networks, honor your networks if you're deciding to go into the media communication space, and also be proactive, right? Like, don't wait on a job listing, email, knock on their door. You'll never know where your proactiveness and resilience, the word that we all we all
Boycott that word.
your resilience will get you. But thank you so much, Susana and Rina, for coming on. I hope this is not our last episode. I feel like we should keep creating, keep exploring new ways to present news or to provide a space for people to come to and, you know, relate to the conversations being held. But I'd love you guys again, of course, back onto our show. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Breaking Waves, like, subscribe, and everything that those people say when they say like and subscribe to their YouTube channel. But thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you again on Friday.
Yay.